Who runs 8 miles through a blizzard for a dying wolf and survives? This lone Omega does, dragging fate by the throat while snow blinds, bones freeze, and every step screams danger. One wrong move and she's gone. One heartbeat late, and the beast dies. But what crashes into her path after that night flips everything. You won't believe what waits when loyalty meets power. The cold came first. Always the cold. It seeped through the cracked timber walls of the abandoned ranger cabin like skeletal fingers searching for warmth, for life, for anything soft enough to strangle. Mira Lawson pressed her thin shoulders against the stone hearth, watching the dying embers glow faint orange in the darkness, each flicker a small defiance against the frozen void beyond her door. 23 winters she had survived, though survived felt like too generous a word for what she did. Existed, perhaps. Endured. Clung to breath when breath itself seemed a burden too heavy to carry. She pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around her frame, feeling the sharp jut of her own bones beneath the wool. The cabin offered little beyond 4 walls and a roof that leaked when the snow melted, but it was hers in the way that nothing else had ever been hers. No pack, no family, no alpha to command her submission or demand her loyalty. Just silence and cold and the endless stretch of Northwood Forest pressing against the windows like a living thing waiting to swallow her whole. Outside, the blizzard howled with a voice that sounded almost human, almost grieving. The wind tore through the pines with such violence that the entire cabin shuddered on its foundation, and Mira found herself counting seconds between gusts, the way she used to count her father's footsteps in the dark. 1, 2, 3. The memory surfaced unbidden, and she shoved it down hard, burying it beneath layers of practiced numbness. There was no use in remembering. The dead stayed dead no matter how often you called their names. She had been 7 years old when the Blackwater Pack came in the night. Her father had been a healer, her mother a tracker. Both valued members of the Silverpine Pack until politics and territorial disputes turned neighbor against neighbor. The accusations had been absurd, treason fabricated by rivals who wanted her father's position. But truth mattered little when power decided guilt. They had dragged her parents into the center of the pack grounds while the moon hung fat and indifferent overhead. And they had made the children watch, made them witness what happened to those who fell from favor, who dared to question, who existed in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong blood in their veins. Mira could still hear the crack of her mother's neck snapping, could still see her father's eyes searching the crowd for his daughter even as they bound him in silver chains. He had found her there in the press of bodies, and his last words had been soundless, mouthed across the distance. Run. So she had run. A 7-year-old Omega child fleeing into the wilderness with nothing but her mother's herb pouch and her father's final command ringing in her ears. The Silverpine Pack had not bothered to pursue her. Lone Omegas rarely survived more than a season in the Northwood, especially children. The forest would do their killing for them, slow and cold and certain. But Mira had not died. She had learned instead. Learned which roots could be eaten and which brought fever. Learned how to set snares for rabbits and dig through snow for winter mushrooms. Learned that the human shape made you vulnerable in ways the wolf shape did not. And so she had stayed human for months at a time, year after year, until her wolf felt more like a ghost than a companion. Some Omegas lost their wolves entirely when separated from pack bonds too long. Mira suspected hers lingered only out of spite. 16 years she had survived alone in these woods, moving from abandoned shelter to abandoned shelter, trading herbs and healing salves to the few trappers and outcasts who lived on the edges of pack territories. She had built a reputation among them, the strange Omega healer who asked no questions and expected no loyalty. They paid her in dried meat and candles and once, memorably, a wolfskin cloak that she had worn until it fell apart in her hands. This cabin had been her home for 3 years now, the longest she had stayed anywhere since childhood. It sat 8 miles from the nearest trapper's outpost and 12 miles from the southern border of Silvercrest territory, far enough from pack politics that she could pretend the world beyond the trees did not exist, far enough that when the howls rose at night, She could tell herself they were only wind. The blizzard intensified, and something heavy slammed against the cabin's outer wall hard enough to rattle the dishes on their shelf. Mira jerked upright, heart hammering against her ribs. Wolves did not venture this deep into the Northwood during blizzards. Neither did bears. She grabbed the iron poker from beside the hearth and moved toward the door, every muscle coiled tight. Her wolf stirred for the first time in weeks, uneasy and alert. Another thud, this one weaker. Then silence. Mira pressed her ear to the door and heard it. Breathing. Ragged and wet and desperate. Something alive was dying on her doorstep. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to stay inside, to let the storm finish what it had started. Nothing good came to those who opened doors in the dark. Nothing good came to lone Omegas who made themselves visible, vulnerable, known. But her hands were already working the bolt, her father's voice a whisper in the back of her mind. A healer does not choose who lives and who dies. A healer serves life, even when life has not served them. The door flew open and the storm roared in, bringing with it a wall of snow and wind that nearly knocked her backward. She braced herself against the frame and looked down. A wolf lay collapsed in the snow at the threshold, massive and dark-furred and bleeding from a dozen wounds that painted the white ground crimson. Not a wolf, an alpha. She could tell by the size alone, the sheer muscled bulk of him, easily twice the mass of any normal shifter in wolf form. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, and even as she watched, the snow began to cover him in a burial shroud. Mira's mind screamed at her to shut the door. Alphas meant packs. Packs meant questions, claims, dominance and submission, and all the nightmares she had spent 16 years running from. If this wolf died here, his pack would come searching. If he lived, he might decide a lone Omega was his by right of rescue. There was no version of this story that ended with her still alone, still safe, still free, but she was already kneeling in the snow, already pressing her hands to his neck to feel for a pulse. It fluttered beneath her fingers, weak but present. His wounds were severe, deep slashes across his ribs and a gash along his shoulder that suggested claws rather than blades. Pack fight, maybe. Or rogues. The Northwood held plenty of both. He was too heavy to carry. She tried lifting his head and nearly dislocated her shoulder. The storm was worsening, visibility dropping to near zero, and the cold was already seeping through her clothes with vicious intent. If she left him here while she fetched help, he would be dead before she returned. If she stayed with him, they would both freeze. A healer serves life. Mira swore with every foul word she had learned from trappers and outcasts, then grabbed the wolf by his front legs and began to drag. He did not wake, did not stir, dead weight sliding through snow that came up to her knees, her boots losing purchase with every step. Her shoulders burned, her lungs screamed. The cabin door was only 10 feet away, but it felt like miles. She got him halfway across the threshold before her strength gave out, and she collapsed beside him, panting frost into the air. Her wolf surged forward suddenly, lending her strength that should not have been possible for an Omega alone. She hauled him the rest of the way inside and slammed the door against the storm. The cabin was freezing now, the fire nearly dead, and she had just brought a dying alpha wolf into her only sanctuary. Mira knelt beside him and pressed her hands to his ribs, feeling the ragged rise and fall of breath. His fur was matted with blood and ice. She needed to stop the bleeding, needed to warm him before hypothermia killed what blood loss had not. She stumbled to her shelves and grabbed every clean cloth she owned, her jars of salve and tincture, her sewing kit with its curved needle and sinew thread. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped everything. Focus. She forced herself to breathe, to think like a healer instead of a terrified Omega with an alpha bleeding out on her floor. The wounds first. She had to shift him enough to reach the worst of them, that deep gash across his shoulder, where she could see exposed muscle glistening in the firelight. She packed it with yarrow and comfrey paste to slow the bleeding, then began to stitch. The needle punched through skin and fur, and he did not even twitch. Unconscious or dying, she could not tell. His ribs were worse. 3 long claw marks that had torn through fur and flesh, deep enough that she worried about internal damage. She cleaned them as best she could with melted snow and whiskey, the only antiseptic she had, then stitched those too. Her fingers were numb and clumsy, and she had to stop twice when her vision blurred with exhaustion. By the time she finished, dawn was bleeding gray light through the windows, and her entire body felt like one massive bruise. The wolf still had not woken. She checked his pulse again and found it slightly stronger, enough to kindle a fragile hope in her chest. She built the fire back up until the cabin was almost warm, then dragged every blanket she owned over his massive form. He looked smaller somehow beneath the blankets, less like a monster and more like just another broken thing the world had chewed up and spit out. Mira sat back against the wall and watched him breathe. In, out, in, out. The rhythm of it steadied something in her own chest. She must have fallen asleep because she woke with a start to find the cabin dark again and the wolf still unconscious beside the fire. 2 days passed like that. She changed his bandages, forced water between his jaws when he was lucid enough to swallow, watched him drift in and out of fevered sleep, his body fighting infection and blood loss and the cold that had tried to claim him. On the 3rd day, she woke to find him watching her. Not the wolf. Him. The man. He had shifted sometime in the night. His human form sprawled naked beneath the blankets, and his eyes were open and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Dark eyes, almost black, alpha eyes. He did not move, did not speak, just watched her with the stillness of a predator deciding whether to pounce or retreat. Mira scrambled backward until her spine hit the wall, her heart slamming against her ribs. He was massive even in human form, all muscle and scars and raw physical presence that filled the small cabin like smoke. A silver chain was tangled around his neck, half hidden beneath dark hair, and she caught the glint of a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Pack symbol. Royal pack symbol. She knew that symbol. Everyone in the territories knew it. Nightfall pack. The Alpha King. Her voice came out as a whisper. You need to leave. He blinked slowly, as if processing her words took effort. When he spoke, his voice was rough with disuse and pain. You saved me. I shouldn't have. She forced herself to meet his eyes, to push back against the sheer weight of his presence. Alphas could dominate through will alone, and kings were alphas among alphas. She could already feel the pull of it, the instinct to submit, to bow her head and bare her throat. She crushed it down with 16 years of practice. You need to leave as soon as you can walk. Why? He shifted slightly and winced, one hand moving to his bandaged ribs. Why save me if you wanted me gone? I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not Omegas. The words came out bitter, and she hated the weakness in them. Not ones like me. His eyes narrowed, searching her face. She saw the moment he scented her properly, saw recognition flash across his expression, followed by something darker, something hungry. His entire body went rigid, and his hands clenched into fists against the floor. What's your name? His voice had dropped an octave, rough and dangerous. Mira did not answer. Giving him her name felt like giving him power, and she had so little power left to give. She stood on shaking legs and moved toward the door. I'll get you water, then you rest, then you leave. You're not Pack. It was not a question. No marks, no bonds. How long have you been alone? She stopped with her hand on the door latch. The question cut deeper than he could have known. Or maybe he did know. Maybe that was the point. Long enough. That's not a life. That's survival. Survival is all I have. She stepped out into the snow before he could respond, gulping cold air into her lungs like a drowning woman breaking the surface. Her wolf was pacing inside her mind, agitated and confused. He smells like mate, like home, like everything we lost. Mira silenced her with a viciousness that left them both reeling. There were no mates, no homes, no packs or bonds or belonging. There was only this, the endless cold and the careful distance she kept between herself and anything that could hurt her. And this alpha, this king, would hurt her. Maybe not with teeth or claws, but with the weight of what he represented, the world she had run from, The life that had killed her parents and left her alone in the woods with nothing but ghosts for company. When she returned with water and dried meat, he had pulled himself into a sitting position despite the obvious pain it cost him. The blankets had fallen to his waist, and she could see the full extent of the damage she had stitched back together. Claw marks, bite wounds, a history of violence written across his skin in old scars and new blood. She set the provisions beside him without getting too close and retreated back to the far wall. He ate in silence, his movements careful and deliberate. When he finished, he looked at her again with that same unnerving focus. "The blizzard," he said quietly. "How far did you drag me?" Mira shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude she heard in his voice. "A few miles. I don't know. Does it matter?" "A few miles." He repeated the words as if testing them for truth. Then, almost to himself, "You could have died. So could you. I was dying. You weren't." His jaw tightened. "Why?" "I told you. I didn't have a choice." "Healer's oath?" She nodded, surprised he knew. Most alphas considered healing women's work beneath their notice. "My father's oath," before they killed him. The air in the cabin shifted, tension crystallizing into something sharp and painful. He was watching her with new understanding now, piecing together her story from the fragments she had let slip. Orphan, healer, alone. The sum of her parts adding up to something that should not have survived, but did anyway. Who killed him? The question was soft, but there was steel beneath it, a promise of violence that made her wolf whimper. Does it matter? They're dead or they're not. Either way, it doesn't change anything. It matters. Why? She heard the anger in her own voice and did not try to hide it. You going to avenge a stranger because I saved your life? Track down everyone who hurt me and make them pay? That's not how the world works. Bad things happen to weak people and no one comes to save them. That's the only truth that matters. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Mira laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "For what? You didn't do anything." "No, but my father might have." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, this king bleeding on her floor, and felt the weight of 16 years pressing down on her chest. "What? You said before they killed him. Past tense. A healer and his family, executed for treason or territory disputes or whatever excuse they used." He met her eyes, and she saw grief there, old and familiar. "My father waged wars across these territories for 20 years. Silver Pine was one of them. If your family died in that conflict, it was likely on his orders." The cabin felt too small suddenly, the walls closing in. Mira could not breathe, could not think. The man she had saved, the alpha she had dragged through a blizzard and stitched back together, was the son of the king who had destroyed her life. The king whose wars had created the chaos that let rivals murder her parents while everyone looked the other way. "Get out." Her voice shook. "Get out of my house. I can't walk yet. I don't care. Get out." He tried to stand and his legs buckled, sending him back to the floor with a grunt of pain. "2 more days. Give me 2 more days to heal and I'll leave. You'll never see me again. You'll send your people here. Your pack. They'll come looking and they'll find me and—" "No." He cut her off with absolute certainty. "No one knows I'm here. I'll tell them I sheltered in a cave. No one will bother you. You're a king. Kings don't just disappear. This one did." His expression hardened. "I left the castle without escort because I needed to think. Needed to be away from the weight of that crown even for a day. The storm came faster than I expected. I tried to outrun it and I couldn't. Then rogues found me weak and alone and thought they'd found easy prey. By the time I killed them, I was dying. And then I woke up here." Mira wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold together pieces that felt like they were fracturing. 2 days. Then you leave and you forget you ever saw me. Agreed. But she could see the lie in his eyes. He would not forget. Neither would she. Something had shifted between them in this cabin, something that terrified her more than the cold or the wolves, or the memories that stalked her dreams. She had saved his life, and he had given her truth in return, the ugly truth that bound them together, whether either of them wanted it or not. His father's wars, her father's death. The line between them was drawn in blood that would never wash clean. That night, Mira lay awake on the far side of the cabin and listened to him breathe. Sleep did not come easily with an alpha so close, her instincts screaming at her to run or submit and finding no acceptable answer. Her wolf was restless, pacing and whining, drawn to him in ways that made no sense. He was the enemy. He was the son of everything that had destroyed her. She should hate him. But when she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, she dreamed of dark eyes watching her with something that looked almost like reverence, and a voice that whispered, "You saved me," as if those 3 words could remake the world. The second day passed in careful silence, each of them occupying separate corners of the cabin like wolves circling territory neither wanted to claim. Mira changed his bandages at dawn and again at dusk, her movements efficient and impersonal, touching him only as much as healing required. He watched her work with that same unnerving stillness, as if memorizing the way her hands moved, the concentration that narrowed her eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow that she had probably stopped noticing years ago. She could feel his gaze on her like heat, like pressure, like something alive and waiting. It made her clumsy in ways she had not been clumsy since childhood. She dropped the scissors twice, tied a bandage too tight and had to redo it while he sat silent and patient, never commenting, never complaining, just watching with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. By afternoon, he was strong enough to stand, to move slowly around the cabin, testing his balance and the pull of stitches across his ribs. She had given him clothes, old trapper's things she had traded for years ago and never worn. They fit him poorly, too small across the shoulders, but they covered him, and that was all that mattered. She could not think clearly when he was bare-chested and bleeding, the sheer physical presence of him overwhelming the small space until the air felt too thin to breathe. He found her books on the shelf by the window, a small collection of herb lore and wilderness survival guides bound in cracked leather. He pulled one down carefully and flipped through pages that had been read so many times the words were starting to fade. "Your father's?" he asked quietly. Mira looked up from the stew she was stirring, surprised he had spoken. They had maintained their silence so carefully that his voice felt like an intrusion. "My mother's. She was the tracker. He was the healer. You inherited both skills. I inherited their deaths." The words came out harsher than she intended, and she regretted them immediately. It was not his fault. Not directly. He had been a child when his father waged those wars, probably no older than she was when her parents died. Blaming him for the sins of his bloodline made her no better than the ones who had killed her family for politics and power. He set the book down gently and moved to sit at the small table, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his wounds. "I inherited a kingdom built on violence. My father believed strength was the only language other alphas understood, so he spoke it fluently and often. By the time I took the crown, half the territories were sworn to Nightfall through fear rather than loyalty. And you?" Mira heard herself ask. "Do you rule through fear?" "I'm trying not to." He rubbed a hand across his face, exhaustion carved into every line. "But fear is easier than trust. Fear is what they expect, what they understand. Trying to build something different feels like trying to hold water in cupped hands. The moment you relax, it all slips away." She ladled stew into 2 bowls and set one in front of him, then took her own to the far side of the table. They ate in silence, but it was a different silence now. Less hostile, more thoughtful. She found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking, noting the way he favored his left side, the silver chain he never removed, the way his hands moved with a warrior's grace, even doing something as simple as lifting a spoon. "Why were you alone in the Northwood?" she asked finally. "Kings don't wander into blizzards without guards." "I told you. I needed to think." "About what?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the cabin walls. "About whether I'm strong enough to be the king they need, or just another version of my father wearing a different face." The honesty in his voice startled her. Alphas, especially alpha kings, did not admit weakness, did not question themselves aloud where anyone could hear. It was vulnerability of a kind she had not expected from him, and it unsettled her more than his strength had. You came out here to die, she said slowly, understanding dawning. You weren't trying to outrun the storm. You were walking into it. No. But the denial came too quickly, too sharp. Maybe. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. The weight of everything. The council pushing me to choose a mate from their daughters. The territories still fighting even after 3 years of peace. The constant watching and waiting for me to fail. He set down his spoon with careful precision. I just wanted one day where I wasn't a king, where I was just a wolf in the woods. And the rogues? Found me when I was too far from home and too tired to care about fighting back. I killed them because my wolf wouldn't let me do otherwise. But by then the damage was done. I shifted and tried to make it back to Nightfall territory. But the storm was worse than I thought, and I was losing too much blood. He met her eyes across the table. Then I smelled smoke. Your fire. I dragged myself here because dying on your doorstep seemed better than freezing alone in the snow. Mira absorbed this, turning his words over in her mind. He had been running, just like she had been running her entire life. Different reasons, different directions, but the same desperate need to escape something that could not be escaped. She understood that better than she wanted to admit. Your pack will be searching for you by now, she said quietly. They'll think you're dead. Probably. You should send word. Let them know you're alive. I will. When I leave tomorrow. He paused, then added, Thank you. For everything. I know it wasn't easy having me here. Tomorrow. One more night and he would be gone. Back to his kingdom and his crown and his wars. And she would return to her careful solitude. The cabin would feel larger without him in it. Emptier. She told herself that was relief. But her wolf whined soft disagreement in the back of her mind. That night, she dreamed of fire, her parents burning, the Silverpine Pack grounds lit up like a funeral pyre, screaming, the smell of scorched flesh. She woke gasping and found him crouched beside her, one hand hovering near her shoulder as if he wanted to touch her but did not dare. Nightmare, he said softly. It was not a question. Mira nodded, not trusting her voice. Her whole body was shaking, adrenaline and old terror flooding her system until she felt like she might fly apart. She had not dreamed of that night in years, had thought she had buried it deep enough that it could not claw its way back to the surface. But his presence here, the truth about his father, had torn open wounds she thought had scarred over. I get them too, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Different scenes, same helplessness. Sometimes I'm my father, making the decisions that killed thousands. Sometimes I'm just watching from the sidelines, unable to stop it. She looked at him in the dim firelight, this alpha king kneeling beside her in borrowed clothes with his own ghosts written across his face. How do you live with it? I don't know. I just keep breathing. Keep trying to make choices that won't haunt me the same way. Keep hoping that's enough. He settled back onto his heels, giving her space. Does it get easier? The nightmares? No. You just get better at pretending they don't matter. He nodded slowly, understanding passing between them like a shared language. They were both broken in ways that could not be fixed, only endured, both carrying weight that would never be set down. The recognition of it created a strange intimacy, fragile and unwanted and impossible to ignore. You should go back to sleep, he said finally. I'll keep watch. You don't have to. I know, but I will anyway. Mira lay back down, her body still trembling with the aftershocks of fear, and watched him move back to his corner of the cabin. He sat with his back to the wall, alert and watchful, and something in her chest loosened fractionally. For the first time in 16 years, she was not alone with her nightmares. Someone else was keeping watch. Someone else was bearing witness to the darkness that lived in her mind. She fell asleep again without meaning to, and when she woke at dawn, he was still there, still watching, his eyes dark and tired and strangely gentle in the early light. The third day arrived with clear skies and bitter cold, the kind of cold that turned breath to ice and made every movement a study in pain. He was well enough to travel now, the wounds healing faster than they should have. Alpha constitution, accelerated by his royal bloodline. By afternoon, he would be gone. Mira packed supplies for his journey without being asked. Dried meat, hard bread, a water skin, a small jar of salve in case his stitches pulled. She set them by the door in a canvas pack and tried not to think about how empty the cabin would feel without his presence filling it. He dressed in his own clothes, the ones she had cleaned and mended while he slept. They were torn and blood-stained still, but they fit him properly. And when he fastened the silver chain around his neck, she saw the full pendant clearly for the first time. A crescent moon cradling a crown, the symbol of Nightfall Pack, the mark of a king. "I meant what I said," he told her as he shouldered the pack. "No one will know you're here. You'll be safe. I'm always safe. That's not the problem." "Then what is?" Mira struggled to find words for the unease that had been growing in her chest since he first opened his eyes. "You're going back to a life that will crush you. I can see it in your eyes, the weight of it. And I'm staying here in a cabin that gets smaller every year. We're both dying in different ways, and there's nothing either of us can do about it." His expression shifted, something raw and painful surfacing. "Come with me." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and insane. Mira laughed, a brittle sound. "To Nightfall? To your castle? As what exactly? A curiosity? A rogue Omega who saved the king's life? They'd tear me apart before I made it through the gates. As my mate." He said it quietly, with absolute certainty, and the bottom dropped out of her world. She stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "What? You're my mate. I knew at the moment I woke and scented you properly. The bond is there, whether you feel it or not, whether you want it or not." He took a step toward her, and she backed away instinctively. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to stop dying slowly in this cabin and come with me to Nightfall where you can be protected, where you can be safe, where you can live instead of just surviving." Protected? The word tasted like ash. "You mean owned?" "No, I mean valued, respected, given a place and a purpose beyond hiding from the world. I don't need your pity. This isn't pity." His voice hardened with frustration. "This is me recognizing what you are to me and trying to do right by you even though every instinct I have is screaming at me to just throw you over my shoulder and carry you back to Nightfall whether you agree or not. Then why don't you?" She heard the challenge in her own voice, the bitter edge that dared him to prove he was just like every other alpha who thought power gave them rights over Omegas. "Because you saved my life. Because you deserve better than being claimed like territory. Because I've spent 3 years trying to be different from my father, and I'm not about to fail now by forcing my will on an Omega who has every reason to hate everything I represent." He held her gaze, his eyes blazing with something fierce and desperate. "But I'm not giving up on this. On us. I'll leave today because that's what I promised. But I'm coming back for you. 1 week, 2 at most. And when I return, I'm asking you to choose. Choose me. Choose a life beyond these walls. Choose to stop running." "I'm not running. I'm surviving. You're dying, Mira. Slowly. Alone. In this cabin that smells like grief and lost hope. I can see it in your eyes every time you think I'm not looking. You've given up everything except breath, and breath alone isn't enough to call a life." The use of her name shocked her. She had never told him her name. He must have heard her talk in her sleep, must have been listening more carefully than she realized. The intimacy of it, of him knowing her name without permission, felt like a violation and a gift, all at once. "How do you know what I need?" she whispered. "You don't know me. I know you dragged a dying wolf 8 miles through a blizzard. I know you spent 3 days keeping me alive when the easier choice would have been letting me die. I know you wake up screaming from nightmares you pretend don't matter. I know you're strong and stubborn and so used to being alone that the thought of belonging terrifies you more than death." He moved closer, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "I know you feel the bond too, even if you won't admit it. I can see it in the way your wolf watches me, the way your breath changes when I get too close, the way you look at me like I'm both your salvation and your ruin." Mira's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. He was right. And she hated him for it. Hated him for seeing through her so clearly. For offering her things she had stopped letting herself want years ago. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you killed. Better to have nothing and expect nothing than to reach for something only to have it torn away. 1 week, he said again. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. He left before she could form a coherent answer, stepping out into the snow and shifting mid-stride, his wolf form massive and dark against the white landscape. She watched from the doorway as he loped away through the trees, moving with the fluid grace of an alpha in his prime, and she knew with sudden, devastating certainty that he would keep his promise. He would come back, and when he did, she would have to make a choice that terrified her more than anything she had survived thus far. The cabin felt enormous without him. The silence pressed against her ears like water, heavy and suffocating. Her wolf paced restlessly, whining for the mate that had just walked away. Mira sank down against the door and let herself cry for the first time in years, great heaving sobs that tore through her chest and left her hollow. She cried for her parents, for the little girl she had been before the world taught her that love was just another word for loss, for the woman she had become, so hardened by survival that she could not recognize kindness when it was offered. And she cried for him, this alpha king who had looked at her with something like reverence and asked her to choose a life she did not know how to want. When the tears finally stopped, she built up the fire and tried to return to her routines, checked her herb stores, set new snares, mended the shirt he had torn during his fight with the rogues. But everything felt hollow now, mechanical movements without purpose. He had been right. She was dying here, had been dying for years. She had just been too stubborn or too frightened to admit it. 3 days after he left, the first assassin came. She woke to the sound of footsteps crunching through snow, multiple sets, moving with the careful precision of trained hunters. Her wolf surged to alertness, and she grabbed the knife she kept under her pillow, pressing herself against the wall beside the door. 4 scents, all alpha, all unfamiliar. They surrounded the cabin in practiced formation, and then one of them called out, "We know you're in there, Omega. Come out peacefully and we'll make this quick." Mira's mind raced. They knew she was here, knew she was an Omega. This was not random. Someone had sent them. But who? How? No one knew about her except Rowan. He had promised no one would know, had sworn she would be safe. Either he had lied or someone in his pack had followed him, tracked him here, and now they were here to eliminate a loose end. An Omega with knowledge of the king's vulnerability. An Omega who had seen him weak and wounded and human. Terror crystallized into fury. She had saved his life, and this was her reward. This was what trusting an alpha bought you. Death delivered with military efficiency. Last chance, Omega. Come out or we burn you out. She looked around the cabin wildly, searching for escape routes. The windows were too small. The door was the only way out, and they were waiting there. If she ran, they would catch her within seconds. If she stayed, they would burn the cabin and her with it. Either way, she was dead. Unless she fought. The thought was laughable. 4 trained alpha warriors against 1 Omega healer who had barely shifted in years. It was not a fight. It was an execution. But she had not survived 16 years in the Northwood by being reasonable. She had survived by being too stubborn to die when death was the easier choice. Mira took a deep breath and threw open the door. They were on her before she could blink, one of them grabbing her by the throat and slamming her against the cabin wall hard enough to rattle her teeth. She drove her knife into his thigh and he roared, releasing her. She rolled away and shifted mid-movement, her wolf form smaller and faster than theirs, diving between legs and snapping at exposed ankles. One of them caught her by the scruff and threw her 10 feet through the air. She hit a tree trunk and felt something crack in her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest, but she forced herself back to her feet, snarling. They were circling her now, all 4 of them in wolf form, their eyes cold and professional. This was just a job to them. Kill the Omega. Collect payment. Move on. The largest one lunged and she dodged, but not fast enough. His teeth caught her hind leg and tore, blood spraying across white snow. She yelped and twisted, biting at his face, his ears, anything she could reach. He shook her like a rag doll and she felt more ribs break, felt her vision start to blur at the edges. This was it. This was how she died. torn apart by wolves sent by the king she had saved. The irony would have been funny if she was not drowning in her own blood. Then a roar split the air, primal and enraged, and suddenly there were 5 wolves instead of 4. The largest wolf she had ever seen crashed into the group like a battering ram, all teeth and fury and unstoppable violence. He tore through the assassins with brutal efficiency, ripping throats and breaking spines, moving too fast for them to coordinate a defense. Rowan. He had come back. The last assassin tried to run, and Rowan ran him down, sinking his teeth into the wolf's spine and snapping it with a single vicious shake. The body dropped lifeless to the snow. Then Rowan was shifting back to human form, naked and covered in blood that was not his own, and he was running to where Mira lay broken in the snow. No, no, no. His hands were on her, checking her wounds, and she could hear the panic in his voice. Stay with me. Please. Stay with me. She tried to shift back to human form and could not. Too much damage. Too much pain. Her wolf was keeping her together through sheer survival instinct, and if she shifted now, she would fall apart. Blood pooled beneath her in a spreading crimson stain. Rowan's hands were shaking as he pressed them against her side, trying to stem the bleeding that would not stop. His wolf was howling inside him, a sound of pure anguish that he could barely contain. This was his fault. He had brought death to her doorstep. He had promised her safety and delivered assassins instead. I'm getting you to Nightfall, he said, his voice raw. The healers there can fix this. They have to fix this. Just hold on. Mira's wolf eyes were glazing over, the light in them dimming with each labored breath. She tried to pull away from him, instinct still screaming at her to die alone rather than be vulnerable in front of an alpha, but she was too weak to fight him off. He gathered her broken body into his arms as gently as he could, feeling the wet warmth of her blood soaking through his skin. Behind him, the snow was painted red with the bodies of the 4 assassins. He had killed them without hesitation, without mercy, and he would kill 100 more if they threatened her. His mate, his salvation, the Omega who had saved him when he was dying, and who was now dying because of him. He shifted with her cradled against his chest, his wolf large enough to carry her slight frame without dropping her. Then he ran faster than he had ever run, his paws eating up ground as the Northwood blurred past him. 12 miles to Nightfall territory, 8 more to the castle. He could make it in less than an hour if he pushed hard enough. If his wolf could sustain the speed, if she could hold on that long. Please, he prayed to gods he had stopped believing in years ago. Please don't let her die. Take me instead. Take anything. Just let her live. Her heartbeat was stuttering against his chest, irregular and faint. He could feel her slipping away despite the desperate grip of her wolf on consciousness. She had fought so hard, had survived so much. It could not end like this. It could not end with her bleeding out in his arms because he had been arrogant enough to think he could walk away and she would be safe. The border markers of Nightfall territory appeared through the trees, and he howled, a long, desperate call that would bring every wolf within miles running. He needed healers, needed help, needed a miracle. His packmates responded immediately, their howls echoing through the forest as they converged on his position. The first to reach him was Marcus, his head warrior, who took one look at the broken Omega in Rowan's arms and went pale. My king, what? Rowan shifted back to human form, still holding Mira's wolf body against his bare chest. Get the healers to the castle now. Every healer we have. Send riders. I don't care if you have to drag them from their beds. Move. Marcus ran. Others appeared, warriors and scouts, all of them staring in shock at their king covered in blood with a dying Omega in his arms. Rowan ignored them, shifting back to wolf form and running again. The castle was close now. He could see the towers rising above the tree line, dark stone against darker sky. The main gates were already open when he arrived, guards scrambling out of his way as he thundered through the courtyard still in wolf form. He burst into the main hall and shifted mid-stride, his human shape materializing as he laid Mira's wolf body on the long table where his council usually met. Blood dripped onto ancient wood, and he did not care. Nothing mattered except keeping her alive. Someone get me clothes, He snarled at the nearest servant who stood frozen in shock. "And where are my healers?" "Coming, sire." The elderly head healer, Iris, swept into the room with 3 younger healers behind her, their arms full of supplies. She took one look at Mira, and her expression went grim. Everyone out except healers and the king. Now. The room cleared in seconds. Iris moved to Mira's side and began her assessment with quick, efficient movements, her hands glowing faintly with healing magic. Multiple broken ribs, punctured lung, severe blood loss, deep lacerations on the hind leg. She's in shock and her wolf is struggling to maintain the shift. "Can you save her?" Rowan's voice came out desperate, stripped of all royal authority. "I don't know. The damage is extensive and she's been alone too long. Her wolf is weak from isolation. If she had pack bonds to draw from, healing magic would work faster. But as it is..." Iris shook her head. "I'll do everything I can, but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that it won't be enough." "No." Rowan grabbed the edge of the table hard enough to crack wood. "That's not acceptable. There has to be something." Iris looked at him with ancient eyes that had seen too many kings come and go. "There is one thing. If you claim her, if you complete the mate bond, she could draw on your strength, your alpha healing. It might be enough to tip the balance. She hasn't accepted the bond. Then she dies. I'm sorry, sire, but those are the options. Claim her and give her a chance, or watch her bleed out on this table." Rowan stared down at Mira's broken form, his mind racing. To claim her without permission, without her conscious agreement, was everything he had sworn not to do. It was dominance and force, and the abuse of power that his father had perfected. It was becoming the monster he had spent 3 years trying not to be. But the alternative was letting her die. Letting his mate, his salvation, the woman who had saved him and asked for nothing in return, slip away because he was too principled to save her life. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. "Do it," he said quietly. "Tell me what I need to do." Iris nodded and stepped back, giving him space. "Bite her. Mark her. Let your alpha bond flow into her wolf and anchor her to this world. The rest will happen naturally if the mate bond is true." Rowan moved to Mira's head, his hands gentle on her fur. She was barely breathing now, her eyes closed, her body limp and unresponsive. He leaned down close to her ear and whispered, "I'm sorry. I know you didn't want this. I know I'm taking your choice away, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. But I can't let you die. Forgive me." Then he bit down on her scruff, his teeth piercing fur and flesh, and he pushed every ounce of his alpha power into her through the mark. The mate bond snapped into place like a physical thing, a golden thread connecting them that blazed with sudden fierce intensity. He felt her wolf gasp and surge toward the bond, desperate and starving for connection after so many years alone. Power flowed between them. His strength became hers. His life force fed into her dying body, and he felt her wounds beginning to close, bones knitting back together, torn flesh mending. She shifted suddenly, her wolf form collapsing into human shape, and she lay naked and unconscious on the table, still bleeding but alive, still breathing. Rowan released his bite and staggered backward, his legs nearly giving out. The bond was overwhelming, a torrent of sensation and emotion that he had not been prepared for. He could feel her pain as if it were his own, could feel her fear and rage and the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had fought too long without rest. He could feel her wolf curled around his through the bond, clinging to him like a lifeline. Iris was already working on her, packing wounds with salve, stitching deep cuts, pouring healing magic into her with renewed efficiency now that she had pack bonds to draw from. The other healers moved around her like a synchronized dance, passing supplies, checking vitals, murmuring soft encouragements. "She'll live," Iris said finally, stepping back with blood on her hands and relief in her eyes. "The worst is past. She needs rest now, days of it, weeks probably, but she'll live." Rowan sank into the nearest chair before his legs could give out entirely. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. When she wakes up, she's going to be furious that you marked her without permission. Omegas don't forgive that kind of thing easily, especially ones who've been on their own as long as she has." Iris studied him with knowing eyes. You love her already, don't you? I barely know her. That's not what I asked. Rowan looked at Mira's still form on the table, her dark hair matted with blood, her face pale as death, and he felt the mate bond pull tight in his chest. She saved my life. Then she told me the truth about my father's sins. Then she looked at me like I was worth saving, even though I represented everything that had destroyed her. How could I not love her? Then you'll find a way to make this right. You're more like your mother than your father, Rowan. She would have done the same thing. Saved the life first, dealt with the consequences after. Iris gestured to her assistants. Get her to the king's chambers. She'll need comfort and safety when she wakes. She'll run the moment she's strong enough. Then you'll have to give her reasons to stay. They moved Mira carefully, wrapping her in soft blankets and carrying her through the castle corridors to his private chambers. Rowan followed, still naked and covered in blood, ignoring the stares of servants and guards who had never seen their king in such a state. He did not care about propriety or protocol. His mate was hurt, and he needed to be near her, needed to feel the bond humming between them to confirm she was still alive. His chambers were large and comfortable, dominated by a massive bed that had belonged to the royal family for generations. They laid her in the center of it, her small form nearly swallowed by pillows and furs. Rowan dismissed the healers and servants with a gesture, then sat beside her on the bed, not touching, but close enough that he could watch her breathe. The mate bond was settling now, less overwhelming and more like a steady presence in the back of his mind. He could feel her emotions even unconscious, the flickers of nightmare and pain that drifted across the bond like smoke. He reached out carefully through the link and pushed comfort toward her, warmth and safety, and the promise that she was not alone anymore. Her breathing eased fractionally, her face relaxed. The bond pulsed between them, acknowledging his presence, accepting his offering of peace. Rowan sat with her through the night and into the next day, leaving only when absolutely necessary and returning as quickly as possible. His council demanded audiences. His warriors wanted reports on the assassins and where they had come from. The entire castle was buzzing with rumors about the Omega their king had brought home dying and naked and marked. He ignored all of it. His mate needed him, and that was all that mattered. On the third day, she woke. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion and pain written across her face, and then she felt the bond and her expression shifted to horror. She tried to sit up and gasped, her hand flying to her ribs where the worst injuries had been. Rowan was beside her instantly, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Easy. You're safe. You're in Nightfall Castle and you're healing, but you need to rest. She stared at him, her eyes wide and dark with betrayal. You marked me. You were dying. It was the only way to save your life. You marked me without my permission. Her voice was shaking, each word sharp as broken glass. You took my choice. You claimed me like I was yours to take. I know, and I'm sorry, but I would do it again if it meant keeping you alive. He held her gaze, refusing to look away from the accusation in her eyes. Hate me if you need to. Rage at me. Tell me I'm no better than my father. But you're alive, and I can live with your hatred if it means you're breathing. Mira's hands were clenched into fists in the blankets, her whole body trembling with emotion. Where are my clothes? Being cleaned. I'll get you new ones. Whatever you need. I need to leave. You can't. Not yet. You're still healing, and whoever sent those assassins is still out there. If you go back to the Northwood alone, they'll just send more. Then I'll die fighting. At least it'll be my choice. The words hit him like a physical blow. He could see she meant it. Would rather die free than live claimed. The mate bond between them ached with the force of her rejection, and Rowan felt something crack inside his chest. Please, he said quietly. Stay. Not as my mate if you don't want that. Not as my Omega if you refuse the bond. Just stay as someone I owe a life debt to. Someone under my protection until we find who wants you dead and eliminate the threat. Then you can leave if you still want to. I won't stop you. You marked me. The bond won't let me leave even if you wanted to. I'll find a way to break it. There are old magics, rituals that can sever mate bonds. If that's what you want, I'll make it happen. She stared at him in disbelief. You'd break the mate bond? Alphas don't do that. It would hurt you as much as it would hurt me. I'd endure it if it gave you your freedom back." He reached for her hand and she pulled away, but he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. "I made a mistake, a necessary one from where I stood, but a violation of your autonomy nonetheless. Let me try to fix it. Let me protect you until you're strong enough to protect yourself. Then we'll revisit the question of the bond and what you want to do about it." Mira was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face for deception or manipulation. The mate bond hummed between them, carrying his sincerity, his regret, his desperate hope that she would give him a chance to make things right. Finally, she nodded once. A small, sharp movement. 1 month. You have 1 month to find whoever sent those assassins and eliminate the threat. Then I leave, and we break the bond. Agreed? Agreed. She lay back against the pillows, exhaustion clear in every line of her body. I hate you for this. I know. You had no right. I know that too. If you ever take my choice away again, I'll kill you myself. Rowan almost smiled at the fierce certainty in her voice. I believe you. She closed her eyes, dismissing him, and he stood to leave. But as he reached the door, she spoke again, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. Thank you. For saving me. For coming back when the assassins came. He looked back at her, this small, fierce Omega who had survived impossibly and who he had bound to himself through desperation and love. Always. I'll always come back for you. The door closed behind him and he leaned against it, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened settle on his shoulders. He had saved her life and possibly destroyed any chance they had of building something real between them. The mate bond would hold her here physically, but her heart and trust were locked away behind walls he had just made 10 feet higher. Marcus found him standing there minutes later. Sire, the council wants a meeting. They're demanding answers about the Omega. Tell them she's my mate and under my protection. Anyone who threatens her answers to me directly. They won't like that. I don't care what they like. Rowan straightened, pulling the mantle of kingship back around himself. Have your best trackers examine the assassins' bodies. I want to know who sent them, who paid them, and who in this castle knew about Mira's existence. Someone leaked information about her location, and I want names. You think it's internal? I don't know. But 4 trained alphas don't just stumble on a lone Omega in the middle of the Northwood by accident. Someone told them where to find her. Someone wants her dead. And I'm going to find out who before they try again. Marcus nodded and disappeared to carry out his orders. Rowan stood alone in the corridor and felt the mate bond pulse softly. Mira's presence a warm weight in the back of his mind. She was alive. She was angry and hurt and unwilling, but she was alive. That would have to be enough for now. In his chambers, Mira lay awake long after the king left, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. She was in Nightfall Castle, marked by the Alpha King, bound to him through a mate bond she had never wanted, trapped in a life she had spent 16 years running from, and somewhere out there, someone wanted her dead badly enough to send assassins. She touched the mark on her neck, feeling the raised edges of the bite scar, and through the bond she felt him. His worry, his guilt, his fierce determination to protect her even from himself if necessary. It would be easier to hate him if the bond did not keep showing her his truth, the complicated man beneath the crown who was trying so hard not to become his father. But she had survived this long by trusting no one, by keeping her heart locked away where it could not be used against her. Love was weakness. Bonds were chains. And this Alpha King, no matter how sincere he seemed, was still the son of the man who had destroyed her family. 1 month she had given him. 1 month to prove himself or condemn himself. 1 month to find the threat and eliminate it, or watch her walk away despite the agony it would cost them both to break the bond. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under. Her last conscious thought a whispered prayer to parents long dead. If you're watching, help me survive this too. Help me survive him. The mate bond hummed softly in the darkness, a golden thread connecting 2 broken souls who had no idea how to be whole. The castle felt like a tomb built for the living, massive stone walls that trapped warmth and light. corridors that stretched endlessly in all directions, and everywhere the eyes of wolves who watched Mira with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. She was an outsider, a rogue Omega with no pack history, no lineage, no value beyond the mark on her neck that declared her the king's mate. They looked at her and saw weakness, saw threat, saw everything their rigid hierarchy had taught them to despise. She spent her first week confined to the royal chambers, healing under Iris's watchful care while Rowan dealt with council meetings and investigations. He visited her 3 times a day, bringing food and updates, asking careful questions about her comfort and needs. She answered in monosyllables when she answered at all, maintaining the careful distance that was all she knew how to give. The mate bond made distance difficult. She could feel him even when he was on the other side of the castle, a warm, constant presence in the back of her mind. When he was stressed, she felt it like tension in her own shoulders. When he was angry, it burned through the bond like lightning. And when he looked at her with those dark eyes full of regret and longing, the bond surged between them so fiercely that it took all her willpower not to reach for him. She hated it, hated how the bond undermined her carefully constructed walls, how it whispered that maybe he was different, maybe he was safe, maybe she could trust him. Trust was how you got hurt. Trust was how you ended up with your parents executed while you watched. She had learned that lesson in blood, and she would not forget it now just because some mystical force insisted this alpha was her destiny. On the 8th day, Iris declared her well enough to move freely through the castle, though she cautioned against shifting or strenuous activity for at least another week. Mira accepted the news with quiet relief. Being confined to one room, however luxurious, felt too much like captivity. She needed to move, to explore, to understand the terrain if she was going to survive here. The castle was larger than she had imagined, a sprawling complex of stone and timber that housed not just the royal family, but hundreds of pack members who lived and worked within its walls. There were training yards where warriors sparred in wolf and human form, kitchens that fed the population 3 times a day, libraries filled with ancient texts and pack histories, gardens that somehow flourished even in winter, heated by underground springs that ran beneath the castle foundations. She wandered through it all like a ghost, wrapped in borrowed clothes that hung loose on her slight frame, her feet silent on stone floors. Servants bowed when they saw her, but their eyes were cold. Warriors watched her pass with hands on weapons. She heard the whispers that followed in her wake. Rogue, outsider, unworthy. Gold digger who seduced the king for power and position. Weak Omega who could not protect herself and had to be marked by force. The rumors were vicious and varied, but they all carried the same underlying message. She did not belong here. On the 9th day, she found the library and lost herself in books about pack law and mate bonds, searching for any mention of how to break a claim once made. The texts were discouraging. Most agreed that severing a true mate bond was nearly impossible, requiring either death or extremely dark magic that often killed both parties in the attempt. A few mentioned ancient rituals performed by witches who lived in the far mountains, but the success rate was uncertain and the cost was always high. She was deep in a particularly dense tome about bond magic when a voice interrupted her thoughts. "You won't find what you're looking for in there." Mira looked up to find a woman standing at the end of her table, tall and elegant with silver blonde hair and ice blue eyes. She wore a gown of deep blue that marked her as nobility, and around her neck was a pendant similar to Rowan's but without the crown. Pack royalty then. Someone important. "And you are?" Mira asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Lady Celine Drakov. My family has served House Thorn for 3 generations. My mother was your mate's father's most trusted advisor." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I've been away visiting our northern holdings, and only just returned to find Nightfall in quite the uproar over the king's unexpected mate." Mira closed the book carefully. Everything about this woman set her instincts on edge. The way she said, "your mate," with faint disdain. The calculated smile. The way she positioned herself to block the exit. Subtle, but deliberate. "I'm sure the uproar will die down eventually." "Will it?" Celine moved closer, her movements graceful and predatory. An Omega of unknown lineage, no pack connections, No training in court politics or leadership. Marked by the king in desperation rather than chosen with care. Forgive me for being blunt, but you're a liability. A weakness that our enemies will exploit without hesitation. Then perhaps you should take your concerns to the king. Oh, I intend to. But I thought I'd speak with you first. Omega to Omega. Celine's smile sharpened. I was being considered for the position of Luna before you appeared. My bloodline is impeccable. My training is extensive. I would have made Rowan a worthy queen and strengthened his political position immeasurably. But then you saved his life in the woods and he developed an infatuation that he's mistaken for a mate bond. Mira felt anger kindle in her chest, hot and defensive. The bond is real. I didn't ask for it and I don't want it, but it's not something he imagined. Bonds can be influenced, manipulated. There are herbs and potions that can create the illusion of a mate bond to an alpha who's desperate enough to believe it. Celine leaned against the table, her posture casual, but her eyes sharp. I'm not saying you deliberately deceived him. Perhaps you genuinely believed you were helping. But the fact remains that you are not suitable to be Luna of Nightfall, and the longer you stay, the weaker Rowan's position becomes. What do you want from me? Leave, quietly. I'll arrange for the bond to be severed by a witch I know in the Eastern Mountains. She's discreet and skilled. You'll walk away with your freedom and enough gold to start a new life wherever you choose. Rowan will be hurt temporarily, but he'll recover, and Nightfall will have the Luna it deserves. Mira stood, drawing herself up to her full height, even though she barely reached Celine's shoulder. I gave the king 1 month to resolve the threat against my life. When that month is over, I'll make my own decisions about leaving. I don't need your gold or your witch or your permission. How noble. Celine's voice dripped with contempt. Playing hard to get while you calculate how much you can extract from him before you run. I've seen your type before, little Omega. Survivors who've learned to use their weakness as a weapon. But you're out of your depth here. This is not some forest cabin where you can hide from the world. This is a kingdom, and kingdoms require strength, not sentiment. And you think you're strong? Mira heard herself ask. You who needs to threaten a recovering Omega to feel powerful? You who can't win the king's heart honestly, so you're trying to buy your way to a crown? The words hit their mark. Celine's expression hardened, the polite mask cracking to reveal fury beneath. You have no idea what you've stumbled into. No idea what forces are moving around you. I'm offering you a clean exit before things become unpleasant. Is that a threat? It's a courtesy, one I won't extend again. Celine straightened, smoothing her gown with deliberate care. Enjoy your month, little Omega. I suspect it will be educational. She swept out of the library with practiced elegance, leaving Mira alone with racing thoughts and the uncomfortable certainty that she had just made a dangerous enemy. The mate bond pulsed with Rowan's concern. He could feel her distress through the link, and moments later he appeared in the library doorway, his eyes scanning for threats. What happened? His voice was tight with worry. I met Lady Celine. Mira tried to keep her tone neutral, but heard the edge in it anyway. She made her opinions about me very clear. Rowan's jaw clenched. What did she say? That I'm unsuitable to be Luna. That I should leave before I damage your position further. That she could arrange to have the bond broken if I cooperated. Mira met his eyes. She was considered for the position before I arrived, wasn't she? The council suggested her, yes. Good bloodline, proper training, political connections. Everything a Luna should be on paper. He moved closer, his presence warm and solid. I refused. Told them I would choose my own mate when and if I was ready. They were not pleased. So I didn't just steal your heart. I stole her crown. There was no crown to steal. I never wanted her. The bond chose you, not the council's political calculations. He reached for her hand and she let him take it, too tired to maintain the distance. Celine is ambitious, and she has powerful allies. I'll speak with her. Make it clear that harassing you is unacceptable. Don't. Mira squeezed his hand once, then pulled away. It'll only make things worse. She's right that I'm a weakness for you. Everyone can see it. The king who marked a rogue Omega without knowing her history, without vetting her loyalties, without considering the political implications. I make you look impulsive. desperate, weak. You make me look like a man who values life over politics." His voice was fierce. "Every king before me married for alliances and power, and most of them were miserable. My father certainly was. I refuse to repeat that pattern. Even if it costs you your throne?" Even then, the certainty in his voice should not have moved her, but it did. She turned away before he could see it in her face. "Your investigators, have they found anything about the assassins?" He hesitated, and she felt the shift in the bond. Bad news. They were professionals, mercenaries from outside our territories, but they were paid in Nightfall coin, which means whoever hired them has access to our treasury. Someone close to me, someone with resources and motive. Celine, possibly, but I can't accuse a noble house without proof. The political fallout would be severe. He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out the library window at the snow-covered training yards below. Marcus is investigating quietly, following the money, tracking movements. If Celine or anyone else in this castle is responsible, we'll find the evidence. And in the meantime, I'm bait. Live bait to draw out whoever wants me dead. Protected bait. I've assigned guards to watch you at all times. Iris is checking all your food and drink. No one gets near you without being vetted." His hand brushed her arm, tentative. "I know you hate being here, hate being bound to me, but I will keep you safe. That much I can promise." Mira wanted to argue, wanted to rage at him for making promises he might not be able to keep, but the exhaustion was too deep. She had spent 16 years surviving alone, trusting no one, needing no one. But she was so tired, tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of the bone-deep loneliness that had become so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. The mate bond hummed softly, offering comfort she was not ready to accept. "What happens after the month is up? If you haven't found who wants me dead, we'll figure it out together. I'm not giving up on us, Mira, even if you've already given up on me." She did not answer, could not answer, because the truth was she had not given up on him, not entirely. And that terrified her more than assassins or hostile nobility, or the weight of a crown she had never wanted. Hope was dangerous. Hope got you killed. But it was blooming in her chest anyway, fragile and stubborn as winter flowers. The days bled into one another after that. Mira explored the castle with her assigned guards trailing at a respectful distance. She found the healing wing and spent hours with Iris, learning new techniques and sharing knowledge about herbs that grew in the Northwood. She discovered the kitchens and helped prepare meals despite the protests of the staff who insisted the Luna should not do such work. She avoided the throne room where Rowan held court, but she could feel him through the bond, the weight of decisions and politics pressing down on him like physical force. At night, he came to their shared chambers, though he always slept on the couch rather than claiming the bed. They talked in the darkness about nothing and everything. He told her about his mother, who had been gentle and kind, and had died bringing his younger sister into the world. The sister had died 3 days later, too weak to survive without their mother. His father had never recovered, had thrown himself into conquest and war as if violence could fill the hole their deaths had left. She told him about her parents, about her father's laugh and her mother's songs, about the herb garden they had kept, and the way they had loved each other with a devotion that made their small family feel like its own world. About the night that world ended and she became something less than whole. "You're still whole," he told her softly. "Just broken in places. We're all broken. The difference is whether we let it destroy us or define us. And which did you choose?" "I'm still deciding." The bond deepened with each conversation, each shared truth, each moment of vulnerability. Neither of them knew how to navigate. Mira felt her walls cracking despite her best efforts to maintain them. He was not what she expected, not the brutal alpha king she had imagined, but a man trying desperately to be better than his blood, better than his crown, better than the world expected him to be. On the 15th day, Marcus burst into their chambers at dawn, his face grim. "Sire, we have a problem." Rowan was on his feet instantly, already moving toward the war room. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that proves your mate was right about Lady Celine." Mira followed them through the castle, her heart hammering. They descended into the lower levels where the dungeons and storage vaults were kept, and Marcus led them to a small room that served as his investigation headquarters. Papers were spread across every surface, maps marked with routes and dates, ledgers showing transactions that should not have existed. We tracked the payment for the assassins through 3 intermediaries before we found the source. Marcus pointed to a ledger entry highlighted in red. Lady Celine's personal accounts. She paid them through a shell merchant company she owns in the Eastern Territories. We also found correspondence between her and the mercenary guildmaster. She hired them 2 days after you returned to Nightfall, carrying an Omega. Rowan's face went carefully blank, the expression he wore when controlling fury. Evidence? Copies of the letters, transaction records. Testimony from the guildmaster who we convinced to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Marcus laid it all out like a feast of damning proof. She wanted the Omega eliminated before you could complete the mate bond publicly. With Mira dead, she thought she could console you and present herself as the logical choice for Luna. Where is Celine now? In her chambers. She doesn't know we've found the evidence yet. Good. Rowan's voice was cold as winter iron. Have her arrested and brought to the throne room. Public trial. I want every member of the pack to witness this. She tried to murder my mate, and she'll answer for it before everyone. Rowan. Mira caught his arm as he moved to leave. She'll have allies, nobles who supported her claim. This could fracture the pack. Then it fractures. I will not tolerate attempted murder of the Luna, regardless of the political consequences. The title landed like a stone in her chest. Luna. She had been trying not to think about what that meant, what it would require of her. But he was claiming her publicly now, defending her honor before the entire pack. She could either accept it or reject him in front of everyone and shatter whatever authority he had left. The throne room was packed by the time they arrived. Word had spread that the king was calling an emergency assembly, and every wolf who could fit into the space had come to witness. Rowan took his seat on the ancient throne of carved black wood, his crown a simple circle of silver that caught the torchlight. Mira stood beside him at Marcus's insistence, positioned as Luna even though she had not formally accepted the role. She felt hundreds of eyes on her, judging, weighing, finding her lacking. The mate bond pulsed with Rowan's steady confidence, lending her strength she did not feel. Lady Celine was brought in with guards on either side, her wrists bound in silver chains. She held her head high, defiant even in captivity, and when she saw Mira standing beside the throne, her expression twisted with hatred so pure it was almost admirable. Lady Celine Dracoff. Rowan's voice rang through the chamber, formal and cold. You stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, of hiring assassins to eliminate my mate, of treason against the crown and pack. How do you answer these charges? I answer that I did what was necessary to protect Nightfall from an unsuitable Luna. Celine's voice was steady, unrepentant. She is weak, untrained, a rogue with no pack loyalty and no understanding of what it means to rule. She has bewitched you with false mate bonds and pretty words while making you a laughingstock among the territories. I sought to free you from her influence before she destroyed everything your father built. My father built a kingdom on fear and violence. I'm trying to build something different. And you're failing. Celine's composure cracked. The other alphas see you as soft, weak, too distracted by an Omega to lead properly. They're already planning challenges, preparing to test you. And when they do, what will you have? A mate who can't fight, can't negotiate, can't do anything except hide behind your protection while you bleed for her. The words struck deep because they held truth. Mira knew she was not what this pack needed in a Luna, knew she was a liability more than an asset. The bond flooded with Rowan's response, fierce and absolute denial. But she could not entirely believe it. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Rowan's voice cut through the murmurs spreading through the crowd. The transaction records, the correspondence, the testimony. You ordered the deaths of innocent trackers to get to my mate. 4 assassins who would have killed her if I hadn't arrived in time. You cannot claim to serve Nightfall while murdering its Luna. She is not Luna! Selene screamed the words, her control shattering completely. She hasn't been formally anointed, hasn't taken vows. hasn't earned the right to stand where I should be standing. You marked her in desperation, not love. You bound yourself to weakness when you could have had strength. And when the challenges come, when the other territories see how far you've fallen, remember that I tried to save you from yourself. Enough. Rowan stood, and the room went silent. I find you guilty of all charges. You are stripped of title and lands. You and your co-conspirators are banished from Nightfall territory effective immediately. If you or yours ever threaten my mate again, I will kill you myself. Guards, escort Lady Selene and her people from the castle. The throne room erupted into chaos. Selene's supporters surged forward, shouting protests and accusations. Rowan's loyal warriors formed a protective barrier around the throne, hands on weapons, prepared for violence. Mira stood frozen beside the throne, watching her worst fears materialize before her eyes. The pack was fracturing, exactly as Selene had predicted, exactly as she had warned would happen. Through the bond, she felt Rowan's absolute certainty, his refusal to bend even as his kingdom threatened to break apart around him. He would defend her to the death if necessary, would sacrifice his crown, his pack, everything he had worked for rather than allow harm to come to her. The knowledge should have been comforting, but it terrified her instead. She was not worth this. Not worth the fracturing of a kingdom, the loss of allies, the potential civil war brewing in this room. She was just an Omega healer who had saved a dying wolf and accidentally become the catalyst for destruction. Selene laughed then, a wild sound that cut through the shouting. Look at them, Rowan. Look at your pack tearing itself apart over a weak Omega who doesn't even want to be here. She'll destroy you. If not today, then tomorrow. If not through assassination, then through the simple fact that she's inadequate for the role you're forcing on her. Remove her, Rowan commanded, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Now! The guards dragged Selene toward the exit, but her voice carried even as they hauled her away. When the challenges come, remember I warned you. When the pack falls because you chose sentiment over strength, remember I tried to save you. The doors slammed shut behind her, and silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Every wolf in the room was watching Rowan and Mira, waiting to see what would happen next. The king had made his choice clear. Now they needed to decide if they would follow or rebel. Rowan turned to face his pack, his posture radiating authority despite the chaos. I understand that many of you have concerns about my choice of mate, that you question whether an Omega without noble blood or formal training can serve as Luna. Those concerns are fair, but let me be clear about something. He reached for Mira's hand and she let him take it, too aware of every eye on them to pull away. This Omega saved my life when I was dying in a blizzard. She asked for nothing in return, expected nothing. When assassins came for her because of her connection to me, she fought them alone rather than endanger anyone else. She has survived 16 years in the Northwood without pack protection, without alpha dominance, with nothing but her own skill and determination. She is stronger than most of you will ever understand. His words resonated through the bond, and Mira felt something shift in her chest. He believed every word, was not just defending her out of obligation, but out of genuine respect for what she had endured. I know change is difficult, Rowan continued. I know you're used to Lunas who were raised for the role from birth, who understand pack politics and territorial negotiations, but the world is changing. The old ways of ruling through fear and violence are dying. If Nightfall is going to survive the next generation, we need to adapt. We need to value strength of character over strength of bloodline. And this Omega has more character in her small frame than most nobles I've met have in their entire lineages. A wolf in the crowd called out, "What about the challenges? The other territories won't accept her. Then they'll learn to accept her. Or they'll challenge me and lose." Rowan's voice was cold iron. I am still your king. Still the strongest alpha in this territory. Anyone who thinks my mate makes me weak is welcome to test that theory in the arena. But be prepared to lose. Silence. No one moved to challenge him. Whatever else they thought about Mira, none of them doubted Rowan's ability to kill anyone who faced him in combat. He had earned his crown through strength, and that strength had not diminished. The Luna anointing ceremony will be held in 3 days, Rowan announced. Those who wish to attend are welcome. Those who don't can leave Nightfall territory permanently. I will not tolerate dissent or sabotage. We are one pack, or we are nothing. Choose wisely." He dismissed the assembly with a gesture and led Mira from the throne room, his hand never leaving hers. She could feel the trembling in his fingers, the adrenaline crash hitting now that the immediate threat had passed. He had just risked everything for her, had drawn a line in the sand and dared his own pack to cross it. When they reached his private study, he released her hand and moved to the window, his shoulders tight with tension. "I should have handled that better. Should have found a way to unite them instead of forcing them to choose sides. You did what you had to do." Mira moved to stand beside him, looking out at the castle grounds below. Celine was right about one thing. I'm not ready to be Luna. I don't know how to navigate court politics or negotiate with other territories. I don't know how to be what this pack needs. Neither did I when I became king. I learned. You'll learn. He turned to face her, his eyes intense. Unless you don't want to. I meant what I said about finding a way to break the bond if that's what you truly want. But Mira, I need you to understand something. You're not a burden. You're not a weakness. You're the first thing in 3 years that's made me want to keep fighting instead of just surviving. The confession landed like a physical touch. She could feel the truth of it through the bond, the way her presence had shifted something fundamental in him. He had been dying in that blizzard, not just physically, but spiritually, drowning under the weight of a crown he never wanted and responsibilities he could not escape. And then she had dragged him to safety and reminded him what it felt like to be saved instead of always doing the saving. "The anointing ceremony," she said quietly. "What does it involve?" "Public vows before the pack. Acceptance of the Luna responsibilities. A ritual binding that will strengthen the mate bond and tie you to Nightfall territory the way I'm tied to it." He paused. "It's permanent. Once done, you'll be Luna in truth, not just in name. Breaking the bond after that would require both our deaths. So I have 3 days to decide whether to run or stay. You have 3 days to decide what kind of life you want. Running means going back to the Northwood alone, always looking over your shoulder, always surviving but never living. Staying means facing challenges and politics in a role you never trained for, but it also means not being alone anymore. Having a pack. Having me." His voice dropped. "Having a chance at something more than just existence." Mira turned away from the window, her mind racing. Everything in her screamed to run, to reject this life and return to the solitude she understood. But she was so tired of running, so tired of being alone. And despite everything, despite her fear and resistance, she had felt more alive in these weeks at Nightfall than she had in 16 years in the forest. "I need time to think. Take all the time you need. Just promise me you'll think about it honestly instead of just defaulting to fear." She nodded and left the study, her guards falling into step behind her as she wandered the castle corridors. Her feet carried her to the healing wing where Iris was grinding herbs for poultices. The elderly healer looked up when Mira entered and gestured to the workbench. "Sit. You look like you're about to fall apart." Mira sank onto the stool and watched Iris work, finding comfort in the familiar motions. "How do you know if you're making the right choice? You don't. You make the best choice you can with the information you have, and then you live with the consequences." Iris set down her mortar and pestle. "You're thinking about running. Everyone keeps telling me what I should want, what I should choose, but no one's asking what I actually want. So what do you want?" The question hung in the air between them. What did she want? She had spent so long surviving, so long focused on the next day and the next threat, that she had stopped asking herself what she actually wanted beyond safety. "I want to stop being afraid," she said finally. "I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want to wake up in the morning and not immediately calculate how quickly I could run if danger came. I want to trust someone without waiting for them to betray me. I want to belong somewhere." Those are all things the mate bond and Luna position could give you. But at what cost? Celine was right that I'm not qualified for this. I don't know how to be a queen, how to lead a pack, how to stand beside an alpha king and be his equal instead of his burden. Iris smiled, her ancient eyes knowing. "Child, No one is qualified for the roles life gives them. We all learn as we go, making mistakes and hoping we survive them. You think Rowan was ready to be king at 25? He was terrified, still is some days, but he does it anyway because someone has to, and he's the only one with the bloodline and the strength. He has strength. I don't. You survived 16 years alone in the Northwood. You saved a dying Alpha King despite knowing it would complicate your life. You faced down assassins and Lady Celine's cruelty, and a whole pack of wolves who resent your existence. That takes more strength than most warriors will ever possess. Iris reached across the bench and squeezed Mira's hand. You're not weak, Mira. You're just used to hiding your strength behind survival instincts. Being Luna would mean showing that strength instead of concealing it. Mira sat with those words long after she left the healing wing. Could she do it? Could she stand before the pack and accept a role she never wanted, trusting that she would grow into it? Could she let herself believe that Rowan's faith in her was not misplaced? The mate bond pulsed softly, carrying his emotions to her even across the distance. Worry, hope, love. That last one made her breath catch. He loved her, not just valued her or needed her, but loved her with a depth that terrified them both. She could feel it through the bond, could feel how completely he had given himself over to caring about her survival and happiness. And she realized with sudden clarity that she loved him too, had been fighting it since the moment he opened his eyes in her cabin and looked at her like she was something precious instead of disposable, had been terrified of loving him because love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. But the pain was there anyway. The vulnerability was there. The only question was whether she would let herself have the love too. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Mira worked with Iris on the ritual herbs and oils. She met with the castle seamstress who created a Luna gown of deep silver that caught the light like moonlight on water. She studied pack law and history with a scholar Rowan assigned to her, cramming centuries of tradition into days of frantic learning. And she talked with Rowan. Long conversations that stretched into the early morning hours, both of them too nervous about the approaching ceremony to sleep. He told her about his doubts, his fears that he was not strong enough to lead Nightfall into a new era. She told him about her nightmares, the way her parents' death still haunted her, the guilt she carried for surviving when they had not. You survived because they wanted you to survive, he told her gently. You survived because you're stronger than the world that tried to break you. That's not something to feel guilty about. That's something to honor by living fully, instead of just existing. The night before the ceremony, she could not sleep. She stood at the window of their chambers watching snow fall in the courtyard below, her mind a tangle of fear and anticipation. She felt Rowan wake behind her, felt him move to stand at her back, his presence warm and solid. Having second thoughts? He asked quietly. Third and fourth thoughts. Maybe fifth. She leaned back against him, letting herself take comfort in his strength. What if I fail? What if I accept the Luna position and then prove Selene right by being inadequate? Then you'll learn and grow and try again. That's all any of us can do. His arms came around her waist, careful and gentle. I spent my first year as king making mistakes that got people hurt, making decisions that cost lives. I wanted to quit every single day, but my pack needed me and I couldn't abandon them. Eventually, I learned how to carry the weight without breaking under it. You will too. You have more faith in me than I have in myself. Someone has to. Might as well be your mate. She turned in his arms to face him, studying the lines of his face in the moonlight. He looked younger like this, without the weight of the crown pressing down on him. Just a man who had saved a dying Omega and fallen in love despite every reason not to. If I do this, she said slowly, if I accept the Luna position and take the vows, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if I'm failing, if I'm truly hurting the pack instead of helping, you'll tell me. Don't let me destroy what you've built out of love or loyalty or misplaced faith. Promise me you'll be honest even when it's hard. I promise. On one condition. He cupped her face in his hands. You have to promise the same. If I'm making choices that hurt you or the pack, if I'm becoming my father without realizing it, you tell me. Be my conscience when I'm too deep in politics to see clearly. Deal." They sealed the promise with a kiss, their first real kiss, and the mate bond blazed between them like wildfire. Every wall Mira had built came crashing down, every defense she had maintained shattered under the force of connection. She could feel everything he felt. The love and fear and desperate hope that this would work, that they could build something good together despite all the reasons they should not be able to. When they finally broke apart, both of them were shaking. "I love you," she whispered. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, and it terrifies me." "Good. I'd be worried if it didn't." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you too. Have since you dragged me through a blizzard and saved my life without asking for anything in return. You're everything I didn't know I needed." They held each other as snow continued to fall outside, two broken people finding wholeness in each other's arms. Tomorrow would bring the ceremony and new challenges and the weight of responsibility they would carry together. But tonight, they had this quiet moment of peace before the storm. The Luna anointing ceremony began at moonrise. The entire pack gathered in the great hall, hundreds of wolves in human and animal form crowding together to witness their king bind himself permanently to the Omega, who had turned their world upside down. Mira stood beside Rowan in her silver gown, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The pack elder stepped forward, an ancient wolf with fur gone silver with age and eyes that had seen 7 kings crowned. He carried a bowl of ritual oil and herbs, the scent of them sharp and earthy in the warm air. "Mira Lawson," the elder intoned, "you stand before Nightfall Pack to accept the position of Luna. Do you understand what this means? The responsibility you take on? The lives you pledge to protect?" "I do." Her voice was steady despite the fear. "Do you pledge your loyalty to this pack? To serve them with wisdom and compassion? To stand beside your alpha in strength and solidarity?" "I do." "Do you accept the mate bond with Alpha King Rowan Thorne? To be his partner in all things? To share his burdens and his joys until death parts you?" She looked at Rowan and found him watching her with such fierce love that it took her breath away. Through the bond she felt his certainty, his absolute faith that she could do this, that they could do this together. "I do." The elder dipped his fingers in the oil and marked her forehead with a crescent moon, the symbol of nightfall. The oil burned where it touched her skin, not painfully, but with a heat that spread through her entire body. She felt the pack bonds snap into place, hundreds of threads connecting her to every wolf in the room. The weight of them was staggering. All those lives now tied to hers, all those souls looking to her for leadership and protection. She staggered under the force of it, and Rowan was there, his hand on her back steadying her. "Breathe," he whispered. "Let the bonds settle. You're strong enough for this." Slowly, the overwhelming pressure eased into something manageable. She could still feel every member of the pack through the bonds, but it was no longer crushing. Just a constant awareness, a web of connection that made her part of something larger than herself. The elder continued the ritual, marking Rowan with the same symbol, renewing his vows as Alpha. Then he bound their hands together with silver cord and spoke the ancient words that had bound Alpha and Luna together for generations. The mate bond strengthened until Mira could not tell where her emotions ended and Rowan's began. They were separate still, but intertwined in ways that went beyond physical or emotional. Soul-deep connection that would last until death. When the elder finally declared them formally bound, the pack erupted into howls. Some were celebratory, others uncertain, but all acknowledging the completion of the ritual. Mira was Luna now in truth. There was no going back. The celebration lasted through the night. Wolves shifted and ran through the snow. Music played and food flowed freely. Mira moved through it all in a daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes from pack members who hours ago had been ready to reject her. Some were sincere. Others were just recognizing the political reality that she was their Luna now, whether they liked it or not. She did not see the attack coming until it was too late. The explosion rocked the great hall at midnight, stone and timber flying inward as the outer wall collapsed. Wolves scattered, screaming, as masked figures poured through the breach. 20, 30, more, all armed with silver weapons and moving with military precision. Celine's voice rang out above the chaos. "This is what happens when you choose weakness over strength, Rowan. Your pack falls because you would not listen." She had not been exiled, had been hiding with her loyalists, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And the Luna ceremony, with every important pack member gathered in one place, was that moment. Rowan shifted instantly, his massive wolf form tearing through attackers. But there were too many. They had planned this too well. Mira's guards tried to hustle her toward safety, but she shook them off. Her pack was under attack. Her people were dying. She was Luna now, and that meant more than just wearing a crown and accepting vows. It meant protecting those who looked to her for leadership. She ran through the chaos toward the healing wing, her mind racing. Iris would be there with supplies, with weapons, with knowledge of the castle's hidden passages. If they could get the non-combatants to safety through the underground tunnels, they could even the odds for the warriors fighting above. The healing wing was already burning when she arrived. Iris was herding patients toward the back exit, her face grim. "Luna, thank the gods. We need to evacuate, but the main passages are blocked. The old service tunnels, the ones that run beneath the foundations." Mira had studied the castle maps obsessively during her weeks here. "They're narrow, but they lead outside the walls. Can you get everyone through?" "If we move quickly." Iris grabbed her arm. "What about you?" "I'm going back for Rowan. He doesn't know about Celine's real plan yet." She had pieced it together during the first moments of attack. This was not just an assassination attempt. This was a coup. Celine wanted the throne, and she was willing to burn down the castle to take it. "Get the innocents to safety. I'll warn the warriors." As she ran back through smoke-filled corridors, using the mate bond to track Rowan's position. He was in the Great Hall still, fighting a losing battle against overwhelming numbers. His best warriors were with him, but they were being pushed back, inch by bloody inch. Mira burst into the hall and found chaos. Bodies littered the floor. The air was thick with smoke and blood. Rowan's wolf was covered in wounds, still fighting but visibly weakening. Celine stood on the throne, watching it all with satisfaction, a sword in her hand. "Rowan!" Mira's voice cut through the noise. "The tunnels! Get your people to the old service tunnels beneath the healing wing. It's your only chance." He heard her through the bond and howled orders to his warriors. They began fighting their way toward the exit she had indicated, a organized retreat instead of a doomed last stand. But Celine saw what was happening and screamed orders to her mercenaries. "Stop them! Kill anyone who tries to escape!" Mira did not think, did not plan. She just ran straight at Celine, surprising everyone, including herself. She shifted mid-stride, her Omega Wolf smaller and faster than anyone expected, and she launched herself at the woman who had tried to destroy everything. They went down in a tangle of fur and teeth, rolling across the blood-slicked floor. Celine was stronger, but Mira was desperate. She fought with everything she had learned surviving in the Northwood, every dirty trick and survival instinct. She tore at Celine's throat, her legs, anywhere vulnerable. Through the bond, she felt Rowan's panic and pride warring as he watched his Luna fight the battle he could not reach in time to fight for her. Then Celine's blade found her ribs and Mira screamed. The silver burned like acid, poisoning spreading from the wound. She fell back, her wolf struggling to maintain the shift through the pain. Celine stood over her, blade raised for the killing blow. "Weak," Celine spat. "Just like I always said, not worthy to be Luna." The blade fell. Rowan's wolf hit Celine like a battering ram, his teeth sinking into her throat and tearing. She died before she hit the ground, her blood mixing with Mira's on the stone floor. Rowan shifted back to human form and gathered Mira into his arms, his hands trying to stem the bleeding from the silver wound. "No, no, no, stay with me. Please, Mira, stay with me." His voice was breaking.